Hello everyone, I'm back for another update. I'm now on the Allegheny Trail between the Raptor Observatory and the Southern terminus. On another hike today because it is a really gorgeous day here. And I am heading northbound back toward the observatory. Today is Saturday, so there were some people up there today at the observatory enjoying the views. I decided to continue on the Allegheny Trail. They're making a stop there earlier, and I'm heading back there. Probably will stop there again before heading back to the car, which is at the trailhead. And as you can see, there are a few blowdowns here. Again, nothing major. And it had already been a crew that cut out blowdowns closer to the observatory. It had not gotten up here yet. As you can see, the leaves are, a lot of leaves have already come off the trees from all the wind. A lot of other leaves are just turning brown. I don't know if it was a salt from the storm that came this far inland. There's a little winds off the ocean that can bring salt far inland, which browns the leaves. But what I'm going to talk about today is the threat for Central Florida. Are they really going to get hammered by yet another storm? I looked at the images this morning. They are shooting energy into a disturbance just north of the Bay of Campeche near the Mexico shoreline. But what makes this dangerous is the flow is going to bring it straight east toward Florida across the Gulf of Mexico and take direct aim on potentially Tampa. I still feel the Gulf is tapped out, and it's going to be hard to get a strong system going in the Gulf right now. With all the systems that have moved through there, I guess that's what we can hope for here, is that they will not succeed in intensifying this disturbance into a major storm, and maybe Florida will come out of this with a lot of rain and just a little bit of wind. Still though, that's the last thing they need right now down in Florida is a lot more rain. They've already had tons of it. Personally, I don't see how it's going to be a major hurricane at this point. We just had the last storm move through that region of the Gulf. Again, though, if they manage to get the motor going on this one as well, we just had those 2 X-flares, which is concerning this past week, which could add enough energy to the system to allow them to get this storm going. I hate to say it. It's the last thing we needed right now is 2 more X-flash from the sun, X7 and X9 in 1 week. That's the last thing we needed right now. If we wanted to see this hurricane season shut down, we don't need more X-flares right now. Those X-flares will put enough heat back into that water potentially. Again, I don't fully understand how much heat that involves. But we are in a solar max, and that's the fly in the ointment with my forecast for lower activity this season. Which was correct up until just a couple of weeks ago. However, this storm will not threaten anywhere else in the U.S. It's going to make a quick run across Florida and be gone, very likely. And there are no others on the horizon after this. But my hope here is that the Gulf is tapped out enough to where even these X-flares will be insufficient. And basically what Florida will end up getting is a lot of rain and some wind. That's my hope. If we had not had these two X-flares this past week, I would say that the Gulf was definitely tapped out. And it's being overhyped for Florida, but I can't 100% say that because, again, two X-flares in 1 week, strong X-flares, could potentially change the complexion of everything. Unfortunately. I still feel that the sun governs our weather, governs our climate, and man's activities are puny, and man cannot change the climate with his activities because the forces that govern our climate are far, far more powerful than mankind. They go way beyond. The sun goes way beyond anything. Man is just extremely puny in comparison. And the cycles that govern climate are not fully understood. Even now, there are lots of long-term cycles involving orbits around the sun, involving solar activity, involving even galactic orbits of our solar system that are not understood, that govern long-term climate trends. I completed my chart on the solar cycles. I'm going to do some more analysis of the parameters I put on the chart to see if there's any answers as to the minor climate fluctuations we've experienced in the last several hundred years between the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age was a result of the Maunder Minimum, which is outside of this record, outside of this chart. It's happened before solar cycles are recorded. So I do have the Dalton minimum and in the chart, and there were some huge differences in solar activity during those three cycles versus what we see now. And the remarkable thing I observed was the stability, the regularity in the 20th century of the solar cycles, how regular they were. You had like 6 or 7 consecutive cycles where the numbers were all very similar. There was very little variation. And that's the reason why the climate in the 20th century was so stable, because the solar cycles for those 70, 80 years were all very similar in numbers, very little variation, and they were all where the months that outnumbered 100 months were over 100 sunspots outnumbered the months with less than 50 consistently through the 20th century, especially after the 1920s, and that's the reason why the climate was so stable during that period. It wasn't until we hit solar cycle 24 where the number of months below 50 exceeded the number of months above 100, for example. I'm just going into one parameter here and making an analysis. The 1800s were much more volatile, much more variation. We had some really strong cycles, but then we had some extremely weak cycles as well, which means the climate's going to be more volatile. 20th century, again, was very, very stable, very consistent, high solar activity throughout most of the 20th century. Very little variation in the numbers until the early 2000s. And 23, you began to see the decline around 2005, and then 2007, as I've stated in previous videos, was the turning point of our climate, where global warming began to turn to global cooling. Before 2007, they didn't have to lie to say our climate was getting warmer. It was. After 2007, when the trend started to reverse, they started to have to lie to cover up what the actual trend was doing. Now, we've gone over 200 sunspots in August for the first time since the early 2000s. Just 1 month, though. Remains to be seen how many more months in this cycle there's going to be. We're already 56 months into the cycle, which is the latest, as I've mentioned, in the cycle that it's ever peaked over 200 for the first time. It took 36 months to get up over 100, which is very late. I think there's only been one or two others that exceeded that. So most cases, not always, but most cases, that means this cycle is going to be a longer than 11-year cycle. Because there is a variation in cycle length. The average 11 years, but some are only 9 years, I noticed, and others are 13, 14 years. And usually, periods of global cooling, you have longer consecutive cycles. They're a longer wavelength, more like 13 rather than 11. Because in that scenario, you have a longer period of time that the sun shuts down, and a shorter time in most cases. And that's where it comes in, where the below 50 sunspot months exceed the over 100 sunspot months. That consecutively over time leads to cooling, whereas the opposite is true. You got a lot of months. Oh, there goes our quail. Just took off. A lot of months over 200 in a cycle. It's going to have a warming effect, and the sun governs our climate. Man is not able to influence our climate in a major way. Maybe heat island effects, it's local, but any climate change that does indeed happen, one way or the other, warming or cooling, is very likely a natural cause that is not fully understood. I mean, there are some people that claim they're underplaying the global warming, that we're at 3.5 C. Whoever makes such a claim has little understanding of past climate. And the medieval warm period, which wasn't even plus 3.5, Greenland was settled, and forests grew on Greenland, and the climate even back then wasn't plus 3.5 C. when we start seeing Greenland up in the 70s every summer consistently, and it's warm enough up there to actually live year-round and have a growing season consistently every year that can support a forest, then I could say that, yeah, we're definitely warmer. That has not happened. However, mankind does have the technological ability to enhance weather systems to make them worse than they would have normally been. They do have that ability. So is the hurricane season going to be over after this Milton? Possibly. This might be the last of it, if we do not get any more solar flares. Because with this latest flurry of storms, we think about how much heat energy has been taken out of the oceans by these systems. How much it has cooled the waters over huge areas of the planet. This can only go so far, and eventually they're going to run out of fuel with all this. So we shall see, though. I feel that Milton might possibly be the last of it, if it does indeed form. And my hope, again, with Milton, to recap, to sum up, is that all Florida gets is a lot of rain and some wind. That's my hope. That the Gulf is truly tapped out, and they will not succeed in amplifying this storm to anything major, at least. I mean, they will amplify the rainfall, there's no doubt there. Yeah, so that is going to be it on this beautiful fall day. The temperature's well up in the 70s, there's almost no wind. The warm weather continues. Because again, we are in a high level of solar activity. The flow tends to be more zonal during these periods, and it does tend to be milder. There's going to be it. I will be back soon.